his person, for just such an occasion. He kept these in the side pocket of his coat, rather than in a top pocket. This was why the electric eel, rather than the pair of pre-gritted teeth, had fallen onto his great-nephew. Out on the landing, the early light of dawn filtered through the large picture window. A picture window is a big window, usually with a large enough area of glass to permit one to see a view as pretty as a picture, not to be confused with a picture of a window, which is a picture of a window. The view from this window was of Mad Uncle Jack's treehouse, built entirely of dried fish and covered in creosote. The creosote not only protected the treehouse from bad weather, but also from the neighborhood cats, who loved the smell and taste of dried fish, but who hated the smell and taste of creosote. Some might think the treehouse pretty in the pinky early morning light. There was something quite salmony about it. That's the word, salmony. Still half asleep, which, if my math serves me correctly, means that he must also have been half awake, Eddie Dickens followed Mad Uncle Jack down the front stairs. He lost his footing a couple of times, but managed to remain upright and stumble on. The heavy velvet curtains were closed in the hallway, and it was pitch black. Pitch is a kind of gooey tar that is very, very black, so pitch black is a way of saying very, very black, using fewer letters, so long as you don't then have to explain what pitch is, as I've just done. Mad Uncle Jack found the front door by walking into it. The advantage of having the beakiest of beaky noses was that it reached the door way in front of the rest of him, so he managed to limit his injuries. "Off!" he said, which is the universal noise a person makes when walking into a door, unless he or she stubs a toe, that is. The universal noise for stubbing a toe is "ah!" but you can choose the number of exclamation marks that best suits. "Are you all right?" asked Eddie, blinded moments later as his great-uncle threw the door open wide, letting in the morning sunshine. "There's no time to lose, boy," said Mad Uncle Jack, a trickle of blood running from his nose. The picture window on the landing looked out onto his treehouse at the back of the building. The front door opened onto the front. The clue is in the name. And there, right in the middle of the huge sweep of gravel driveway, was a hearse. A hearse served the same purpose then as a hearse serves today. It was for transporting dead bodies in coffins from A to B. Assuming that you wanted the coffin taken from A to B, it might be taken from A to Z, if you asked very nicely. The difference is that hearses today are sleek black motor cars, whereas motor cars hadn't been invented in Eddie Dickens's day. For that reason, hearses were often glass-sided carriages pulled, or drawn, as horsey folk would say, by a pair of black horses with plumes of black feathers. The driver of a hearse would be dressed in black too, only this hearse didn't appear to have a driver, and the coffin was half in and half out of the back. The horses appeared nervous, skittish even, whatever that may mean, and they were shuffling their hooves around uneasily. Their flesh looked sweaty, and their eyes were wide. Mad Uncle Jack was already scrunching across the gravel. Eddie ran to keep up. "What's happening?" he gasped. Who's died?" "Your parents are asleep upstairs, and Mad Aunt Maud is safely tucked up in Marjorie," Mad Uncle Jack reassured him. Marjorie was a cow-shaped carnival float that Eddie's great-aunt lived inside, in the gardens of Awful End. If you don't know why, I wouldn't let it bother you. It won't really lessen your listening enjoyment. "I was awoken by the sound of frightened horses, and this is what I found, a driverless hearse." "And this is what you got me up to see?" asked Eddie nervously. If these pitch-black, yes, that word pitch again, horses bolted, the coffin was bound to fall to the driveway and smash open, and who knew what or who might spill out onto the ground. "Indeed, I do not want your great-aunt troubled by such a sight. She is a sensitive creature, and your parents need their sleep with the busy day that lies ahead. I feel confident that, with your experience of training horses, we'll soon have this carriage off the premises." "But I've never trained horses," Eddie Dickens explained patiently. Living with Mad Uncle Jack and Mad Aunt Maud, you had to be patient. "So you've lied to me all these years, have you, Edmund?" said his great-uncle sternly. "Next you'll be telling me that you never fought alongside Colonel Marley at the fall of St. Geobad." I think you're confusing me with someone else, Eddie protested. I'm only 13. Well, almost. Mad Uncle Jack frowned.
You never trained horses?
Eddie shook his head.
And you never fought alongside Colonel Marley at the fall of St. Geobad?
No, sir, said Eddie. I don't even know what the fall of St. Geobad is.
Me neither, said Mad Uncle Jack. And there'd be no point in asking you now.
Do you think it might have been a waterfall? Eddie suggested helpfully.
St. Geobad seems a ridiculous name for a waterfall to me, boy. Preposterous. I've often wondered whether St. Geobad was a church.
A church that fell down? Eddie mused. But why would Colonel Marley be fighting by a falling-down church?
A point well made, sir, said his great-uncle. Perhaps it means fall, as in autumn.
One of the horses at the front of the hearse snorted, causing steam to rise from its nostrils, and the listener to remember the hearse, which was in serious danger of being forgotten because Uncle Jack, Mad Uncle Jack, that is, and Eddie Dickens were getting sidetracked.
Well, you're here now, boy, said Mad Uncle Jack. So what I want you to do is to calm the horses while I go to the back of the hearse and push the coffin back inside.
Eddie would have preferred it if his great-uncle had done the calming of the horses, and he'd gone around to the back of the hearse. He knew from books he'd read, such as Life After Being Kicked, and Horsey Horrors, for starters, that nervous horses were inclined to kick out at people who turned up uninvited to try to calm them down. But then again, Mad Uncle Jack was a lot stronger than he was. He'd be able to slide the coffin back inside much more easily.
Good horses, nice horses,
said Eddie in the kind of voice some people use when they're cooing over a baby in a pram, saying,
Doesn't he have his mother's eyes?
If a baby really had his mother's eyes, she'd be screaming her head off and calling for a child psychologist, the police, and an ambulance, and trying to get the eyes back off him. He took a step forward. Scrunch. Both horses fixed their wide eyes on his. They reminded Eddie of the glass eyes on Mad Aunt Maud's stuffed stoat, Malcolm. He took another step forward. Scrunch. The horse's eyes looked even more wild, even more crazy, if that was possible. Forget Malcolm. They reminded Eddie of even Madder Aunt Maud herself now. Scrunch. One of the horses whinnied. Eddie dug his hand inside the pockets of his trousers. In one was a carrot, and in the other a fistful of sugar lumps. What a lucky break! What were the chances of having a carrot and a fistful of sugar lumps in your pocket when you wanted to try and make friends with a couple of frightened horses attached to a hearse, eh? In Eddie's case, quite high, actually. Sugar lumps were still considered an exciting innovation by Eddie's mother, Mrs. Dickens, or that nice Mrs. Dickens to her friends, even though they'd been around since 1790. To her, they were one of the many marvels of the age, like gaslighting. No more candles. Simply turn the gas tap, light the gas, and hey presto, instant light. Knock the gas tap on with your top hat, don't light the gas, and big explosion sooner or later. Sugar lumps. Sugar in a perfect cube. How's it done? Who knows? Why's it done? Because we can. Eddie's mother loved gimmicks, and sugar lumps certainly fell into that category. She had recently insisted that Eddie carry a fistful with him everywhere. The carrot was for a more practical purpose. Mr. Dickens, Eddie's father, thought that a boy of Eddie's age should carry a knife with him for protection and for whittling. Mrs. Dickens thought that Eddie might cut himself, so a compromise was reached. Eddie would carry a carrot for protection and for whittling instead. Eddie knew better than to argue. Anyway, he didn't feel he needed protection, having once organized a mass escape from an orphanage single-handedly, and had no idea what whittling was anyhow. The horses smelled the sugar lumps and the carrot, and suddenly looked a whole lot happier. Eddie scrunched over to them with increasing confidence, and started to feed them the treats, patting their muzzles and muttering what he hoped were encouraging words. Much to Eddie's amazement, Mad Uncle Jack had stuck to his side of the plan and was successfully pushing the coffin back into the glass-sided hearse without a hitch.
"There,"
said Mad Uncle Jack.
"All done."
At that precise moment, There was an enormous explosion, and the sound of shattering glass, and a plume of smoke appeared above the proud rooftop.